Langford. Emma Langford was one of the artists who appeared on the cover of Dreams by the Cranberries with the Women in Harmony group in 2020. She also recently appeared on the Tommy Tiernan Show where she performed her original song Birdsong.
It's a weird kind of a time at the moment because, like, on the one hand, it's quite busy. There's a lot of projects kind of happening, really, really fun ones. But then also it's sort of this weird limbo space where I spend, an hour, 3 hours in a row just sitting in my pajamas scrolling and waiting for responses to emails and stuff. So I suppose it's probably what a lot of people working in any job, in any normal 9 to 5 have to deal with as well. It just feels amplified by being at home, I think.
Yeah, and I think technology the screens can become quite overwhelming, like when we're on social media and we're on numerous apps and then we have our emails and everything else, so it can become a bit, I don't know, like it's kind of surreal or something, you kind of feel like you don't know where you're at. It feels a bit straight, like
it's very discombobulating.
Is life real at the moment?
Absolutely. And how about yourself? Are you busy?
I'm busy teaching. Like I'm really lucky that it hasn't really affected my work at all. I teach a bit of singing and a bit of keyboard, like online. So I only do 1 day a week at the minute because I went back to college last year. So yeah, I'm down in the Cork School of Music.
Oh, I know it well. I have a few friends from
You did I seen that you did a degree and a master's, but I wasn't sure what it was in.
Yeah, so I did in the University of Limerick. I did in the academy there. I did the BA in what was called the BA Voice and Dance, and it's now called the BA Performing Arts. And I specialised in voice, but had to do a degree of a certain amount of dance as well as part of that, which was interesting. My personal hell in many ways, but interesting. And then I did a master's a couple of years after that in community music. So, yeah.
Cool. Do you know Sai from that course, by any chance?
I do, yeah. Myself and Sai have worked together loads.
Yeah, because I seen that she was on the Tommy Tiernan performance with you, and I know Sai, like we wouldn't have been friends or anything. I know her from Kildare back in the day when we were in school.
Okay.
She used to have this little rock band, like a little kind of a girl rock band.
Yeah, she posted about it recently. It's so gas. Seeing pictures of her from back then. It's so funny.
I know, and like I just remember like I never talked to her or anything back when I was a teenager, but I just remember like looking up to their band so much because I really wanted to have my own band. So
yeah, well, that's so nice. That's lovely, isn't it? It's really important. Like I didn't have anyone really around me, other than I went to the same school as Dolores O'Riordan, so she was kind of a constant presence in different ways in my life growing up. But she was also very alien to what I was doing musically, in that I wasn't doing a whole lot, but when I was doing anything, it was very folky, songwritery kind of thing. So I don't know, there was a disconnect there, and I didn't have anyone, like there were no bands in my school. There was the orchestra, which was again just nothing close to what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's lovely to have someone a couple of years ahead of you in school who's doing something like that. I'd loved to have seen something like that in Limerick.
Oh, it was brilliant. Like, we used to have, like, at the Arts Centre, used to host battles of the bands and, like, just different, like, events for underage bands and stuff. Then they stopped doing it all because they wanted, like, kind of a slightly posher audience to come into their It was really sad because it was, like, kind of our only place to go, and, like, they stopped all the skaters from, like, skating outside the building and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think something like that is really needed for people who want to do that side of things. Like
definitely, yeah. Like in Limerick, we had this cafe called Java's. Well, there's a few different variations on Java's. There was Java's in town, which was where I spent most of my teen years dossing, and it's where all like the alternative emo kids would go mostly. And then the kind of the goths and the metalers and stuff would hang out outside HMV, just on Cruises Street. They just all congregate there, or like there was a clock up in one of the squares in Limerick. They'd all gather and they just hang out and talk, and like someone would always bring a guitar, and I'd always I'd observe them, but I quite liked the Java's scene because it was somewhere I could just sit quietly and like play chess and read books and drink hot chocolate and stuff. It was really nice. But yeah, teens need those spaces, like you really do, somewhere you can just be creative and express yourself. There's not too many of them.
And you obviously were you songwriting before you went to college and all of that? Like, when did you start?
Yeah, I've been songwriting for So I think the first song I wrote was in secondary school. It was a really bad Irish love song, like very, very bad. There was this, I went to a school in Limerick called Laurel Hill, and there was a Little Miss Laurel Hill pageant. I think
No
I think it was
way.
just first years I got to enter it. And I really didn't want to go for it, but also I was like, I should though, shouldn't, like I should go for this. I should do this because I'm weird, and maybe if a weird kid goes for it, it'll be good.
Yeah.
So I wrote this really bad song, and played it really poorly on the guitar at that, and I don't think I got past like the first round or something. And then I fell madly in love with this guy I met while I was in secondary school, and I wrote a song about him.
Yeah.
And I was about, I would have been 15, 16 maybe. And that was my first foray into it. And then after that, yeah, it was kind of college before I really got stuck back into writing. I think it was the first time I'd kind of experienced, well, no, I had a lot of really interesting experiences before I started college, but I found myself becoming the person I was actually intending to be in college, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did you go to college straight after school?
No, I took a year out. I went away and I worked as a street fundraiser for a year, and I became a manager with the company I was in. And we traveled around the country, so a different county every 2 weeks. And then so I was with them for 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, and met my then boyfriend through that company. And we moved to Galway together and lived in this really dodgy house. That was like, it was very like different people lived there like every week. It was really weird.
Yeah.
And I worked in a toy shop, and he worked in a cafe. He was from New Zealand, and his visa was about to expire. So I booked a flight. I decided I was going to be a hairdresser, and I booked a flight, paid my visa, everything, and arranged to go to New Zealand with him. And that I came home to Limerick before I was due to head off. We traveled around Europe for like 2 months together. Then I came home to Limerick to save a bit of money before I was about to head off to New Zealand. And while I was home, I went out to the university to hang out with some old friends, and just they were part of like this drama camp during the summer or something. And they were all just hanging out and having the crack, and people of all ages from all different nationalities and creeds. I just got stuck in, and we had sing songs and sessions every night, and I fell in love with the idea of going back to college. And the relationship fell apart, and I just decided I needed to kind of pursue whatever this was, and that was sort of the start of me becoming. I had applied for the courses, I did the CAO, I did the auditions and everything, and I got my first choice of the BA voice and dance, and I was like, actually, I don't think I want to be a musician. I want to be a hairdresser instead and travel the world with my Kiwi fiance.
That's gas.
And yeah, that year was kind of the breaking point where I was like, you know what, maybe I actually should get an education and pursue music as a thing. I still didn't know I was going to be a musician. I just said I'd feed whatever this urge was, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us have gone on such a roundabout. Like, I'm 33 now. I know I look a bit younger.
Yeah,
but when I went back to college last year, like, you know, to do the degree, like, I put off doing it for years. But, like, I always kept going back and doing, like, short diploma courses. Like, I've done a few CPDs and stuff. Like, you know, I went to BIM. I went to so many different colleges doing different courses. And then eventually I was like, I'm gigging full time. I'm teaching now. So I might as well go back and get the degree, like, you know, and just have that thing ticked off the list. So
that's amazing. It's great when you can, when you're in a position to feed that kind of spark, when it happens, when you have a sense of like, this is something I want to investigate. There's something in me that needs kind of growth in this direction. So I'm just going to go and see where that takes me. It's so lovely being able to do that. Like, it's, my mom is like a perpetual student. She's like always going back to college. She's really, really into science. She started her degree in Cork back when she was 20, and then she met my dad and they fell in love, and they dropped out of college before either of them got to finish their degrees because mum was pregnant with my older sister. So she's kind of gone back to college a few times since then to just pursue different areas. She's done what's it, product design kind of stuff and material science. She's done bioengineering and all this kind of, it's gorgeous when someone just goes after that kind of thing and wants to learn more. It's so important.
Totally. Yeah, because you can do anything at any age if you want to do it. You don't have to just put your mind to it.
Absolutely.
So I was going to ask you about what training did you get when you were in college, when it comes to the voice? Like, what did you gain from college musically?
So I've had a really interesting journey with my voice. I lost it when I was 12 to nodules. And so I had been in every kind of choir, every stage school. I was singing like 24/7 all the time, at home, everywhere. And then I lost my voice quite abruptly, I suppose, to my kind of memory. And had to go through vocal therapy and vocal rehabilitation and a little bit of vocal training. So that took a couple of years, 2-3 years before I was ever able to kind of sing properly again.
Crazy. It's so young. I actually read that on your website. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I must ask her about that.
Yeah, it was any of the doctors they were shocked that someone my age had gotten them. But I suppose it's probably on the rise, like, because kids more and more are kind of imitating the voices they hear on TV and online now. And I'm sure it's always been happening, but right now the kind of techniques you're hearing, big belters and like pop singers using aren't always necessarily the reality of their voice. There's an awful lot of stuff that goes into the technology behind making a voice sound the way it does on a record. So I think it's happening more and more. But yeah, so I lost my voice, and that's part of why I didn't go straight into college after school as well, as I really didn't think I would ever be able to pursue a career in music.
Wow, so it took that long to kind of get back on your feet with it.
Yeah, it was as much about confidence and security as it was about my actual abilities. And I still had quite bad technique, and it's taken me a long time I have to kind of call myself out and see when I'm very prone to like tension, and bad habits, like jutting my head out when I'm singing or speaking, that kind of stuff. So it's constantly just like watching stuff back. If I feel like I didn't perform something right, watching it back and seeing what I was doing. And then when I went to college as part of my degree, I was actually really lucky. I had a couple of really, really great vocal coaches. So we had like, I think, an hour or 2 hours a week with a vocal coach. Mary, what's her second name? I feel so bad, I can't remember her second name. She was really, really great. She helped a lot
as well.
Yeah, it's just the surnames. There's so many Maura's and Marys and Marys in my life. But she was deadly, and she really, really helped just kind of bringing back to basics sort of technique stuff and figuring out, you can express yourself through your voice in whatever way you want, but if you don't have those kind of core techniques down, you're not setting yourself up for success at all. So you just have to kind of get yourself into the right place in all that stuff. And learning about like even figuring out, it's like learning an instrument, any instrument, learning piano or learning guitar. You're going to be able to achieve so much more with any instrument when you know how everything works. So figuring out placement and how that can impact like the emotion you're projecting through your voice, all this kind of stuff. Using techniques like vibrato and all that kind of thing sparingly, and learning where it's efficient and effective to use is like was a revelation for me, because I think I was very prone to just constant vibrato all the time. So that was great. Yeah,
because I was going to actually ask you about like, how does your vocal, your understanding of your voice, like any training that you've received, influence your authentic voice, or like kind of your personal style of singing, and vice versa? Or how does your songwriting influence your voice? Do you know what kind of, do those things inform how you sing?
Yeah, it's a combined approach, I think. So like, it's about, I think, discovering folk and connecting with folk and trad as genres for me was about embracing my authentic voice. So something I really love in folk and trad is how much it celebrates the true voice, the person
and everything.
Yeah, everything about it is very much. And then there's the far side of that, where people kind of really put on an accent and really put on like a much more maybe rough and ready voice than they strictly have, which is funny to hear. So yeah, it's about finding a balance, but it was a combination of getting the right technique down. So learning, I think I had this really funny habit as well. When I was like maybe 16, 17, the woman that did my vocal coaching when I got the nodules, she ran this masterclass, this vocal masterclass in Limerick at one point, and I went along to it, and I wanted to do My Funny Valentine as my song. So we all picked one song that we would work on for the week, and then we'd record it at the end. And when I was singing it, I was doing all this real like stylized affectation, like physically, like bringing my shoulders up to indicate the expression, the emotion, using my body when it wasn't in my voice and I didn't have the technique to carry it off.
Okay.
So like learning to like keep your body very still and still try and deliver that same kind of emotion, and then bring in any physical stuff you want if you really feel like you want to. But that needs to be complementary, and like embodying the emotion is great, but if your diaphragm is not working and you're not supporting it with breath, then you're fucked. It's just going to fall flat.
And then when you're performing, or even when you're in the studio recording, how do you plan your songs out emotionally? Do you how would you landscape the songs, or do you just go in and sing from the heart and see what happens? Or would you sit down and write it out on paper, kind of where, what you want to do with your voice? How do I portray this type of anger? How do I portray this type of sadness, or whatever the emotion is?
That's a really good question. I don't think I map it. It's something I've learned to do. I've done quite a bit of theatre in the past, and it's something I learned to do with theatre, where you kind of look through the sentence and find each word and find an emotion for each word and bring it up to 200% and then bring it right back, kind of thing. Yeah. It's a really cool approach. Not something I strictly use consciously, but I think maybe it's a thing of, generally before I bring a song to studio, I've played it a million times already myself. I've recorded it on my phone. I've done it with the band. I've done it for a TV spot or a radio spot or whatever, and I've listened back to it and kind of gone, okay, well, I mean, that line is meant to have this significance, and right now, listening to it myself, I'm not hearing that. So what do I need to do? And then I do a bit of research and I listen to other people getting that impact. I listen to how the likes of Wallace Bird or Janice, she's fab. She's a really interesting person vocally, because she's such a belter. Like, she's such a rock vocalist for someone who's supposedly kind of folk. She's very much a rock vocalist. It's really cool. But yeah, so I go away and I listen to the vocalists that I love, and I kind of try and pick apart what is it in the way they're delivering that line that really brings that feeling home, and how can I translate that into my voice, because I don't have the same voice. So how does that translate? And then I try my best to do all those things without hurting myself, without using poor technique. So it's an adult process, but yeah, going into studio is really, I mean, I work with two amazing producers as well, and like, I learned in the past couple of years, the real role of a producer is learning to draw something out of you that you're not getting yourself. So like, they'll listen to how I deliver a line and they'll go, oh, I feel like you were smiling on this word the last time you sang that, and it was really nice. So do you want to try it again, and maybe just on that word, just smile? Or, on that word, whatever you were thinking about when you sang that line, think about that again. Like, if you want to put pictures up in front of you, whatever, do that. But you delivered that in such a beautiful way last time. So it's a bit of a collaborative effort as well.
And did you like kind of hunt down a producer that had the experience working with vocalists in that way, or did you just kind of happen to fall upon somebody that was very good at it? Because maybe not all producers are good at bringing out the best in a vocal.
It's you can get producers who are really good at getting the best technical take, and that's amazing. But I think with my guys, with Chris and Graham, it was I had to produce an album in I think I had 6 months to produce my first album, and I needed good guys who were not hugely expensive and could get something done in a tight turnaround. So I just put that out on Twitter. I was like, look, these are the things I need to take off if I'm going to take someone on right now, because I don't have the budget for a hugely expensive world class. I'd love to have world class, but I wound up getting world class because the guys loved what I did and they were willing to kind of work with me and my budget, which was savage. And so, yeah, it was a combination of things. I had a load of references from people basically who all said, these are the guys you want to work with. These are the guys you want to work with.
Yeah.
And I think, just asking around is something I'll always recommend. Like I didn't hear stuff they'd produced before, which is something I usually recommend to people. Like if you hear something you love and you find out who produced that, then maybe try and work with that person. But I hadn't done a huge amount of research. All I knew was people I trusted came to me and said, work with these guys. So I went with them, and it was the best choice I could have made.
I love that. I love, like, even if I'm like trying to pick a book or something like that, I love just getting a recommendation, because I get so overwhelmed with the amount of choice in different areas in life. Sometimes I like when someone kind of recommends and kind of steers me in a direction, because at least I know that it worked for them, so it might work for me too, you know.
Absolutely. I'm the exact same.
And do you have what's your vocal routine? What's your kind of practice habits, or what do you do to kind of keep your voice on form, or kind of help kind of push the boundary with your voice, or that kind of thing?
There's a few things I do for basic care, and like it's just the standard thing you hear from everyone, just lots of hydration and breathing exercises. Like being physically in good nick is good for your voice. So I don't smoke, I don't drink too much usually. It hasn't been a problem in the past year, but generally speaking, I'll avoid crowded spaces, noisy spaces, and I won't talk in those spaces if I'm in them. And I don't I'll do my kind of podcast chats and radio chats, but generally speaking, I don't do long phone calls, because I learned with the nodules that a big part of what had hurt my voice was lots of very long phone calls, because the way you speak when you're on the phone is totally different to how you'll speak to someone in person.
Yeah,
you're emphasizing things more, or your body's in a state of tension that it's not in when you're physically with someone. So all of those things. But then aside from that, I have this one kind of 45-minute vocal warm-up that my original vocal coach gave me. She took me on again when I was doing my master's as a module. We did vocal technique. And just before I was about to go in and record my album, I was like, look, this is going to be an intensive time. I'm going to be physically stressed. I know that I'm going to be doing a lot of singing. There's going to be a lot of takes, and I need a session with you just to get back to basics and figure out kind of what's going on. So she was really, really kind and let me record that session on my iPad. And now, before I'm about to do anything big with my voice, I'll do that warm up. I'll do it as often as I can, really, but it's definitely a thing I'll come back to. I'll make sure the iPad's charged up and I have access to that file if I'm ever doing a session. And those warm-ups are like, you need a bit of space and you need a bit of privacy to do them, because they sound ridiculous.
I know, yeah.
They're ridiculous. Like, people
Tell
are
me
always
about it.
like, I was doing a show in UL, and I had to do this warm-up backstage where there's no real privacy. Like, there's little windows everywhere and everyone can hear and see everyone in every room. And I was doing this warm-up, and afterwards, was it UL, or was it could have been somewhere else? I think it was UL. And a couple of weeks later, I was doing a show with Irla O'Leonard, and he was talking about, because he was on that same show with me as well. And he was like, you're backstage sometimes and you hear people doing this operatic vocal warm-ups, and it really, and I was like, oh yeah, that was me. Yeah. I know I was only going to do one song, but yeah, that was me. So yeah, having a bit of space to do those is a privilege when you can get it.
Yeah, because I find even with some of my students, like, because they're doing the lesson from on Zoom online, they're like afraid to sing out because they know their family can hear them, or their parent or their family is listening to them, and like, it's so hard. There's one or two of them that are just so shy and they just don't want to sing out, so there's always that little bit of, you kind of just have to have no fear and just sing and not care. But it's kind of hard sometimes.
Oh, it's really hard. I can totally appreciate as well, because like, I'm someone who doesn't really like to take up space, like, in any way if I can avoid it. So like, being in a house with people and making that much noise just for me feels really intrusive. So I'm
Yeah.
trying to like contain myself, but at the same time, you have a job to do and this is part of your job. So you just have to kind of go for it and do it. Like,
Yeah, I think when you get past a certain age, like you kind of just have more self-confidence in yourself anyway. You know, it's different when you're a kid or a teenager, like, you know.
100%.
What was I going to ask you about? So how important do you think voice training is for the likes of an artist like yourself who is performing, gigging pretty much full time? You're doing, like, you did, like, was it 100-day tour you did? Is it a couple of years ago?
Yeah, totally by accident. That was 100. So the way I worked that out was I went on Imra and I had a look at the gigs I'd registered. So that's just the gigs I'd registered. So
Yeah.
there were like weddings and charity gigs and random bits and pieces that I hadn't even made a note of in that number.
Yeah.
So it was about a gig a day for a year, which is
Wow.
a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I remember there was one
Voice.
day when I did like a wedding. I did 2 weddings and a gig in between. One day, and I was like, yeah, I was worn out. I was really stretching myself thin. But yeah, I think vocal technique and vocal training is really, really important. And I don't mean that from a point of view of like every kid who ever wants to be a singer should have a vocal coach and should go to classes every week or anything. It's just a case of going to someone once to get an assessment of your voice and to see where if you really, the same as any sport, any activity, any job, go to someone once, get an assessment of where you're at and what you need to work on. And it's just a case of having regular check-ins then, you know, and keeping an eye on your voice and anything that might be weak, protecting, and anything that you're really, really good at, embracing and embellishing and working on and developing it, you know. I think it's something that, like, I'm such a hypocrite. Like, I'll always tell people, you know, if you're doing one song, if you're doing a 5-minute set, you still have to do a full warm up. And I don't. And I always regret it afterwards if I don't do a warm up before even doing one song, because my voice isn't, it's like going for a run and not warming up. You're going to hurt yourself. Like, you're not going to deliver what you hope to deliver or achieve what you hope to achieve. So, just, you know, set yourself up for success in any way you can.
Absolutely. Like, your voice isn't as flexible and kind of smooth. You might have cracks where you don't want them to appear, you know, when you don't do a warm up. But there's many singers who don't do anything like that, who don't do anything like that and don't have like a proper vocal routine, and like they get away with it. But like, I'm sure like many of those singers have vocal issues. Like just the first famous person that comes to mind would be like Adele. Like, she's had crazy issues with her voice. You know, and she's a professional singer touring the world, you know, but I think it is important to have some understanding of your voice so you can understand. Because I know when I started studying about like vocal coaching and all of that, my singing got better because I was able to kind of go, oh yeah, okay, I didn't realize that that's why my voice is doing that. I can maybe change it and then get a better result.
Yeah, it's like finding superpowers. Like, you kind of you learn about these little things within your kind of capacities. You know, like I remember the first time I learned the difference between, you know, head and chest voice, and there was stuff I was doing vocally anyway, like jumping between chest and head voice in a word or in a line, whatever, that was, you know, at a glance technically impressive, but when I actually learned how that works and what it means to do that and how you can do it safely, repeatedly, it meant it improved exponentially, and I actually felt it when it was happening. And even like being in choirs growing up was the most valuable thing I could have done for myself, especially when they're led by someone who really knows what they're talking about. So you can get choir leaders who are just people in the community who love to sing, and that's great as well. But if you get someone who's leading a choir who is a vocal coach or who really understands the voice and what it can do, it means the world. Like, there's a few songs I've done and they have these moments of like really pianissimo, just really still, quiet kind of a delivery of a word or a line, and learning to do that without vibrato, the kind of breath control that you need to be able to carry a line like that was just a massive epiphany for me. That was huge.
Yeah, I think singing in choirs is actually such a valuable experience for any singer, because, you know, you learn so much about harmony and blending and there's a great community spirit as well, so that's kind of obviously good for mental health, and there's just so many benefits of working with groups.
Yeah, I'd say it's something people are really missing at the moment. I miss being in a really good choir. Like when I was a teenager, I was in so many of them, and they did so much for my self-esteem as well. Just being in a group of like-minded people just singing together is incredible. But like I've done one Zoom choir session during lockdown with a group in Donegal who wanted to learn one of my songs. And I could just feel that they were all really missing just being in a room together. It's great being able to do a Zoom and kind of have a chat and have the crack or whatever. But there's proven like loads and loads of research around the value of singing in a choir with a group of people. And like, if you can't physically do it, it's just not the same. Obviously, it's still brilliant. You can do it, but it's not the same.
No, it's not the same, and it never will be. But yeah, it is nice to have something to cling on to, and like obviously with COVID and everything, all live gigs and everything have stopped, but like you've had actually quite a busy year despite all of that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the different gigs and things that you've been involved in over the year and collaborations?
Yeah, it's been a bit mad actually. Like I kind of expected it to be a really restful time. I thought maybe I would just sit back, I'd use this time to do a bit of research. I'd applied for a bunch of like residencies and retreats to do some research into different things. And I, when everything fell through and the proverbial hit the proverbial, I did think I'd be able to kind of just stay at home and do that reading myself and maybe learn a bit of piano and all this kind of, and none of that transpired. None of that happened. I just wound up getting these things come my way. So everyone decided, oh, everyone else must be really bored, so let's all come up with things to keep them busy. I was like, no, I actually would like to be bored for like 5 minutes. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But no, obviously, you can't turn down work when it comes your way. So I got a few lovely collaborative opportunities with, the Irish Women in Harmony. So we released 2 singles in 2020 and have a potential album in the pipeline for this year, which is amazing. So it'll be a bit of co-writing, which I haven't done much of. It's very daunting, but it'll be interesting. And then aside from that, I kind of set up my own weekly sessions for 10 weeks during the first lockdown, where I brought artists on and we did like a little bit of an interview about what's going on in their life and how they were finding lockdown at the time. And we had a theme every week. So I'd play a whole bunch of songs. I was on for like 2 hours every night. And then the artist would come on and they would do a song based around that theme as well. And we dedicate each session to a different charity. So we wound up raising like 10 grand for charities over the course of the sessions, which was really, really cool. And it kept people company. And in the comment sections, there was a little community growing as well, which is fab. And then just a bunch of really cool kind of TV and radio opportunities happened as well, which, stuff that came my way that like, I don't know if it would have necessarily happened were it not for everyone being in lockdown. Silver lining.
Just watching RTE over the Christmas and that, I've really noticed that there's so much support for Irish music on RTE, and I don't know if that's always been the case or is it just like magnified this year because of lockdown. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think definitely there's been a huge boost in the kind of support that's being shown. It's really nice to see. It's high time it happened. I think a lot of people behind the scenes, there's some brilliant women behind the scenes that are pushing for better representation of Irish artists, of women in music. There's these different kind of champions behind the scenes that are really, really pushing for it, which is brilliant. And yeah, I hope RTE and I hope, the various bodies that are making things happen keep this going outside of lockdown, because I know I've seen loads of artists get a really needed boost out of it in terms of like public profile and just, I suppose, just the personal sort of self-esteem boosts that is needed from getting a platform with national media. Like that's huge. So it's been it's been a really wonderful 12 months for that. But you're right, there definitely has been RTE have upped their game. They need like a dedicated Irish music show, realistically.
Completely. Like I couldn't believe it to be honest, watching RTE. Or like I was like, I don't remember this much support, and especially for like younger and newer acts as well. do you know, like, I felt like in the past RTE would have the same acts on that have always been on every year at Christmas time and all the rest, you know, and that's fine. We want to see that too, but we want a nice, diverse selection of artists. We want to see the new music and, you know, what people are doing now and how the scene is changing. And like, even like the likes of yourself, like you're quite traditional kind of style. Like your music is quite traditionally influenced, which I think is so lovely. And it's really kind of refreshing to hear a younger voice coming out with something like that now, you know.
But it is nice. It's nice to get a chance to be part of what can sometimes feel like a very closed circle. With the tradition, it's very precious, and it should be. It's very precious. It's very sacred. It's very protected. And as someone who, I suppose, from song to song, I dabble in different styles. For me, it's about kind of what I'm absorbing from the world around me. So I'm always very conscious that I'm a little bit of an intruder in the traditional and folk world, in that I'm not a purist. And I can totally appreciate the desire for those people who are purely folk, purely trad, and really embrace the culture and tradition. But I am finding it really, really lovely being included and introduced to that world, and it not being a feeling of, oh, well, you haven't been doing this all your life, so you're not allowed to do it at all ever, kind of thing. The likes of Temple Bar Trad have been, like, I posted a big long blog on my Patreon last night, because I'll be part of Temple Bar Trad Fest this year in a couple of different ways. But the first thing I'm doing is a virtual broadcast from Dublin Castle on the 28th.
Fantastic.
With it's gorgeous. Like, it's with Donal Lunny, Andy Irvine, and Fiachna O'Brien.
Wow.
So 3 kind of icons of the Irish. Well, Fiachna is, in his own way, he's folk and trad, but Hot House Flowers are obviously kind of trad rock sort of thing. But to be part of, like, I put up this blog post, and it was basically saying, like, I played one show in 2018 with Aoife Scott. She does these secret circle sessions as part of Tradfest most years. So she asked me to be part of that, and I went along, and I knew that a lot of the American bookers for different festivals go to these things. So I was like, you know what, this is the year I really want to go to America. I really want to go. So I went, and I was rocking up to the church for my sound check, and I saw all these people in their various Irish festival hats and t-shirts and merch standing around outside the entrance, just kind of chatting and mingling and stuff. And I walked up to them and had my guitar in my back, so they obviously knew I was about to go into sound check. Made my introductions, whatever, and they were like, we were just talking shite, you know, like the usual crack. And at one point I mentioned my mother, and one of them was like, "Oh, who's your mom?" And I was like, she's my mom. And then it twigged at me, like, oh, okay, because, like, it's run by Aoife Scott, Mary Black is part of it, Francis is part of it, you know, you've got Sheila, all these, like, big names from the Irish folk and trad world who are part of these dynasties were all on the lineup, and I was the only person on the lineup that wasn't known, wasn't part of one of these dynasties or anything. And these guys were like, oh, who's this person, she's new, who's her mom, kind of thing. And that was really interesting for me to kind of walk into that world and see that that's the expectation, and to be in a position to kind of break it, you know?
Yeah.
To kind of go, oh, you know, I'm not part of that, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to celebrate this. And I want to travel around the world and share what we as Irish people have to offer musically. But yeah, it's lovely to get a chance now to grow that and to experiment and explore it. I think a good example of someone who has done it in the past is Noreen Nirian, who is an amazing sean-nós singer, but she's not, you know, 4th generation part of the tradition. She moved to the Gaeltacht with Mícheál Súilleabháin when they were young, and she learned, and she, you know, immersed herself and really invested her time and her energy in learning about the tradition and embodying it, and then bringing it to other people. And she gets a little bit of, you know, there's people who've kind of said, you know, she's not really, it's not 100% pure trad sean-nós kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but, you know, she introduced me to it in a lot of ways, and that's so valuable.
But isn't music always evolving? why not allow it to stay evolving? And, you know, that way as well, you're going to invite a wider audience in to enjoy it and to kind of learn about it and, you know, spread awareness about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something like it's really worth obviously having those people, the collectors out there, the archivists who are keeping a record of how things were, how they originated, and bringing that to people. Like listening to the original sean-nós singers, even the way the language has changed. Like the Irish language has evolved so much. And the way they sing it, and the tradition with sean-nós singing of it's called Cas Auron, so it's literally to turn a song, and a sean-nós singer would close their eyes and they'd hold the hand of the person next to them, and they'd wind their hand while they're singing, and it's kind of got its roots in the, like, you know, working tradition of how sean-nós would have happened, and it's just beautiful old things that you don't see too much anymore. And I have huge respect for that and love for it. And I'd love to see it happen more. But as you say yourself, every genre evolves. Every genre has its offshoots. And I think I love the appendage of new. So new folk, new rock, new trad, all this kind of stuff. Adding that to a genre, I think, is totally an acceptable way of kind of going, you know, this isn't 100% the pure form of the tradition, but it's an interpretation of it and it's a celebration of it. And I love hearing, you know, the likes of Radie Pete, who's the vocalist for Lankum. She's got such a wonderful way of honouring and celebrating the tradition while bringing it into a modern context. And vocalists like that are so interesting. Like it's cool to hear someone who's got it in their bones. You know, it's in their DNA. It's just beautiful to hear it. But there's a place for that, and there's a place for everything else as well.
Do you know, I'm just getting thought coming into my head there about, I was first thinking that it'd be cool to see like maybe some kind of gig or something, or maybe even an album where it was like the evolution of traditional music. And then popped into my head about, you know, Pentatonics, the way they did, like they do like the evolution of like different genres, or they do the evolution of a specific artist. It'd be cool to see something like that for trad and like have it starting right, you know, back at the roots and like seeing it evolve, either like a gig or something like that. I think it'd be a really nice way to kind of catalogue and to display the kind of evolution of the genre. Yeah,
it really would. It'd be deadly. It's something I love to see happen is the hybridization, the fusion of like Mícheál O'Sullivan did a fabulous job of it. He would learn, he had this huge knowledge of Irish traditional music. The way he played was outside of the tradition, but he would sample in these little snippets of traditional riffs and tunes into these epic pieces on the piano. It's just gorgeous stuff. And the Gloaming do a beautiful job of it as well, of having Irlo Leonard's voice, which is this real traditional vocal over these stunning soundscapes and electronic parts. And I think there's definitely scope for someone to come out and show that development. It's
I think it'd be really cool to see.
Yeah.
What else was I going to say? The gig. I'm having a blank now. What's it called? Comedian.
Oh, Tommy Tiernan.
Tommy Tiernan. I can't think of Mike Rice. Do you know Mike Rice?
Yes. Oh, dear the famous God. Irish TV show, the Mike Rice Show.
Oh, yeah. She'd be delighted. Jesus. So the Tommy Tiernan Show, which is the most kind of recent gig I think you've done, was an amazing gig to get. How did that come about? How did that come about? My words are not working now.
One of those days.
Yeah.
How did that come about? That was a funny one. Last year at some point, this woman followed me on Instagram, and I didn't know who she was, but she looked really interesting, so I followed her back. She was doing a lot of this really interesting kind of life coaching sort of stuff on her Instagram, which I loved. I thought it was really, really it connected with what I was trying to do at the time.
Yeah.
So then I went on Twitter and I put out a tweet saying, I just want to put it out there. I want to be on the Late Late Show this year. I want to sing one of my own songs on the Late Late Show this year. And then I followed that up with, I would also be entirely amenable to playing on the Tommy Tiernan Show or Jules Holland. Just want to put my songs out there into the world on one of those big national TV shows. And everyone was like, yeah, let's get him on the Tommy Tiernan Show. Let's get him on the Late Late Show, this kind of stuff. And And I think it was a couple of weeks later, I got an email or a message from this woman I had followed on Instagram saying, "Hey, I'm a researcher for the Tommy Tiernan Show. I'd love to have a chat with you about maybe doing a guest slot on the show at some point." Now, I don't know if she was following me on Twitter or if she saw my tweet or what happened, but I'd basically been working my arse off putting the album together and getting it out there. And myself and my PR, Louise Barker, had been just doing a load of work to get the digital footprint kind of growing and moving. And I suppose a combination of putting out into the universe what it was I actually wanted, being honest about the very specific thing I wanted, and engaging with people. So like, I didn't know who this woman was, but I still followed her and responded to her content and loved everything she was saying and just connected with it. And then I guess their research team were on the lookout for who they were going to have for the next season anyway. So a combination of factors came together to mean that I wound up recording for the Tommy Tiernan Show, which was class. It's a show I love. Like, the format of it is brilliant.
He's such a gas interviewer, isn't he? Like,
he's
kind of like the worst interviewer, but it so works.
Yeah,
like, he's so awkward. Like,
he just has a conversation with people. He just connects with them on a very real level. Like, and I love that he doesn't strictly know who they are, and they know he's not going to know who they are. It's a brilliant format. I just think it's so refreshing, and it's much closer to the Irish psyche than any other chat show is. Like,
yes, I agree.
I think the Irish psyche, what we love to do is we love to sit in a pub and turn to the person next to us and have a chat with them.
Yeah.
Like, and not have any idea who they are and get to know them and become best friends. Like, that's what we love doing.
Yes.
So the Tommy Tiernan Show gets that and puts it on TV and makes a great crack. I just think it's perfect.
Yeah.
So,
that's what it is, because it's not so produced. It's not so like he's not trying to do things in a certain way or be proper about it. He's just being himself, like, which I think is really authentic.
Yeah, and like, while the people who are on the show might have something coming up or something interesting happening in their lives, the show isn't a plug, which I think is really nice. You don't feel like you're being sold anything. You're just getting to know these people that you maybe have never heard of before. And I like as well that they're quite unpredictable in their choice of guests. So like, having the Begleys on, that a lot of people in Ireland wouldn't have known about, who are amazing trad musicians from Kerry, having the psychologist or the psychiatrist and his daughter, the two doctors on, like,
they were
amazing. Like, they were so funny. And then having Sinead on, who can just open people's eyes. Like, their choice of guests for that show is just so great. So yeah, it was cool to get to do. It was scary as well, because they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I want to do Birdsong, and they were like, "Cool, that'll just be you." So doing that, and I was like, "No, I want all the vocalists from the album, and I want the dancer from the music video to do it with me." And they were like, "Okay, I don't know if we're going to be able to get all of you." And I was like, "That's what I want."
Yeah,
sorry, that's what I want to do. If you want me to tell you what I want, that's what I want. So I will, I'll revise my ideas if that's not possible, but I would love the opportunity to celebrate the people who made this album possible. So
I love that you brought them with you. I love experience with them.
I owe them so much. Like, everyone I chose to be on that track or involved in the music video are all people whose work I admire so much and who have inspired me, like, for years. So it was like the very least I could do to like have them along with me for the crack. And then on the day of the recording for the show, we'd never sung the song together before. So
yes,
they all had to record their parts separately for the album, because they were all just at home recording, so they didn't come into studio for it.
The song is just, I've had it in my head, like, oh my god, since I heard it on the Tommy Tiernan Show, I keep on singing it in my head. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. It's gas, because it was the one I was the least sure about on the album. Like, I wasn't sure I was going to put it on the album or how we were going to do it at all, and the producers were like, no, this is great, this is going to be the first track on the album. I was like, oh, okay. But on the day of recording, we all had to stand 2 meters apart with plastic partitions between us in a room that was so we weren't all facing each other rehearsing. We all had to stand in a line facing away from each other, which is really hard.
In a line, like, facing away from each other.
Yeah, so like, Yeah.
That's awkward. Like,
It
because
was so
it's this
hard.
kind of, you miss that kind of communication aspect of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Like the phrasing, the breathing, every moment of that song is all about like stamina and feeding off the energy of the person around you. Like the way it was written, the reason I wrote it the way I did is it's based on women sitting around a table communicating and singing together, like up close and personal. So having to perform it like that was so unnatural and so hard.
Yeah.
And like you can't hear each other. Like you don't, all you can hear is like when someone's line ends and finishes and starts for the next line or whatever. So that's all we were going off. So
You're hoping it's all going okay. Like,
yeah, like
yeah.
the thing is, you're with any kind of group singing like that, it's all about the quality of the vocal as well. So all I could do was kind of give them tips before going in, kind of going, okay, look, this is what I want you to channel. This is what I want you to think about. This is the energy I want you to try and capture when you're singing. But I can't go around to you one-to-one and listen to you singing it. So we're just going to have to hope for the best and see what happens.
And it
But all those pitfalls in place, it still turned out really, really great. So
yeah.
I'm only thrilled with it.
I was going to ask you about a little bit about I obviously know now just from you telling me that the singers that performed live with you were the singers that sang on the actual recorded version of it as well. So my question would be then, when you're choosing different artists and singers to work with, how do you choose them? And also, do you send lead sheets? Did you have to send them if you were like picking a singer that didn't know your song? Would you send lead sheets, or would you send recordings, or how does that work? For like session work, if you have a session vocalist coming in to do a collaboration with you.
Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot of that kind of work just yet. On this album, I chose those vocalists for that song because they all had very distinct sounds. So they all brought something very different and a really powerful female energy to the song, which was really important to me. And then with other vocalists on the album, so the only other female vocal on the album is Jessica Lean. And that was a vetting process by my producers. So we sat down together, we went through Instagram and YouTube and Spotify and went through a bunch of different singers to kind of see who had the right quality for what we were looking to achieve. So it's not strictly someone who sounds like me, but someone who captures an element of my voice that I'm not fully getting out there myself for the record. So like there's some gorgeous low harmonies on certain songs on the album that Jess just nailed. She has this beautiful kind of smoky quality to her voice when she's in that low range. That's just perfect. So that was kind of our process there. But it's something I really kind of noticed when I was looking for singers for that. People don't put enough content out. Like,
yes,
it's
I'm guilty of it myself.
insane.
I literally I've had this conversation a lot over the last few months about singers and like even like voice coaches and stuff like that. None of us put out enough material. So like when you go to check out someone's page, they don't really have much on their page. And I don't know. I know for me, it's definitely a fear thing. It's definitely like, oh, I'm afraid. I don't want it to be like, imperfect. But I made a promise to myself at the end of last summer that I was not going to say no to myself anymore. If I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to put it out, even if it's not perfect. And then hopefully that will inspire other people to do the same, because I feel like we hold back from putting ourselves out there, and then that stops us from getting work at the end of the day,
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's a few people that I went looking at on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and I could not find any clear, like, it doesn't have to be studio quality, but just clear, like go into a room with go into your toilet, like nice acoustic and just sing something. Like that's all someone needs to hear to kind of go, okay, right, that's the quality of vocal I want for this song. I'd love to do a duet with someone and this is the vocal I need for that. So yeah, I'm actually kind of committing myself this year to do a bit more work where I just show my voice, because I've gotten 2 or 3 beautiful opportunities in the past few weeks that I have been starving for age, and they've just come my way now, and I'm really excited about it. But it's only because I've been putting myself out there, and the Tommy Tiernan Show showing my vocal as it is just on its own was really, really helpful for that.
Totally, yeah.
And then in terms of like how I work with musicians for session work, a lot of that on this album was done by my producers. So I have a group of musicians that I work with quite a bit consistently.
Yeah.
And they're used to my way of working, which is in a room together. I play the song, we get to a part where there's meant to be an instrumental break, and I'll go, okay, so it's meant to go da 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 da, and they're like, wait, what's that first note? Sorry, what? Da, da, da. Yeah, that's it. And we just kind of thrash it out together and like figure out how what I'm thinking translates into how their instrument works, which is challenging, and it's not the easiest way of working, but I find it's a really nice way of embodying the work.
And so you would like sing the lines that you want the different instruments to play, and then you kind of go back and forth until they capture what you want.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, as I say, I'm really lucky with the producers I have, that they're able to read between the lines to a certain degree with what I say I want and what I kind of sing. On this album with my demos, I use GarageBand on my iPad to record arrangements, and then I sent them like breakdowns of like what this harmony is, what's this chord, and they were able to kind of go. They're like much more technically musically skilled than I am, so they were able to kind of go, okay, right, if we're going to transcribe that, here's that chord. And they'll go, there's a clash here, it's a bit dissonant. Do you want that? Is that intentional? Yeah. And I'll be able to say, yeah, that's to emphasize this. And, then when it resolves, it goes to this kind of thing. So I think like if I'm going to give anyone any advice on that front, if you're not skilled with music theory, find someone who is, because not everyone speaks your language. Yeah. And work will move a lot faster with session musicians if you can get someone on board who knows what they're doing on that front. But if you can't find someone to do that stuff, just get nice clear recordings of yourself doing your parts and send that on. Everyone works in a different way, and a good session musician generally will be able to work with whatever you're offering them. It'll take a little bit longer, it might be more expensive, but they'll generally be able to work with whatever you give them.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I went back to do the degree was so that I would have the skills to be able to take on more session work, that if someone sent me the score of a song or whatever and said, here, we need backing vocalist tomorrow on this or whatever, I could just jump in. So I'm just trying to build that up now. So like I came from a background myself of like, I played in a band for like 8-9 years, and gigged and released an album and all that stuff. And I didn't really know much about music theory, just a bit from school and that, but I'm really learning so much now in college, like, so I think it's really valuable to like even have a base knowledge of music theory, like learn your chord progressions.
Absolutely.
At least know your keys so that you can like talk to the musicians that you're playing with.
Yeah, I wonder, is there like a music theory version of Duolingo? Because like it is a language, it's like an app that has a passive aggressive owl that pops up every day and says, hey, have you looked at your circle of fifths today? Hey, it's all that stuff that like, there's all this language. I think the biggest barrier to education is language. Like the thing that put me off, and I've never really pursued theory properly because I've always found it so daunting, the language around it. And I think I've spent a lot of time around musicians who have so much skill on that front, who will just throw these terms out willy-nilly and expect you to understand what they mean.
Yeah.
So like I know in college, like, oh yeah, sure, it's just a circle of fifths, and I'm like, that doesn't mean anything to me. What do you mean by circle of fifth? What's a fifth? What do you mean it's a circle? What?
Yeah.
So I think learning to break all those things down to the absolute basics, and an app like that would be great. Actually, I must find out if there is one.
There are lots of apps to help with like music theory stuff. I don't know. There's definitely ones like for like training your ear, owl, to like hear chord progressions and like intervals and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure there's like a really good website, what's it called? musictheory.com, I think it's called. That one's good. Like it has those little quizzes that you have to like pick the notes and the chords and kind of go through the little questions and stuff like. So yeah, there are definitely apps out there, Maybe could we design a new one?
Absolutely, I'd be up for that. It's just, I would love something that kind of gamifies it in a way that like it's consistent and you can see your progress, because that like same with like learning a language, going into a classroom is a totally different experience, or even going onto just like a website and trying to do quizzes isn't the same as having something on your phone that you check in on every day, and little by little, you don't even know you're learning something, but you're just taking stuff in. I'd love to be better at theory. I just need to figure out a way of getting there.
Yeah, little by little, as you said, like, So what's the plan then for this year? Have you got a plan, or are you kind of just winging it?
I'm kind of winging it, to be honest. There's 3 or 4 projects I'm involved in. for the next couple of months that all have very tight turnarounds. But they're all really different. They're all really interesting. They all explore very different sides of my voice. One of them is a musical theatre project. One of them is a classical kind of Gregorian chant type project.
Cool.
So, you know, two very, very different exercises. Aside from that, I mean, I have tours and gigs booked, but realistically, I don't see them happening. So I'm just lining myself up with writing projects, and I've got a bunch of research I want to do. Actually, the universe is kind of steering me toward a few different research projects now. I've got two projects that explore women in Irish history. Okay. One that explores a man in Irish history. And they're areas that I've wanted to get into for ages. So I think this year is the year that I sort of dig into our sort of pagan and religious kind of background and culture and really get stuck into that and maybe write a few songs on my own around that area of things. So
because you speak Irish, don't you? Was your school a Gaeltacht or?
Yeah, well, so I went to Gael school in Limerick in secondary school, and I went to the Gaeltacht most summers. But as I'm sure a lot of people are the same, I feel like I've totally lost touch with it since. So, like, I still have the cúpla focal, I can have a conversation, ask Gaeilge, but I'm very rusty and very out of practice.
It's lovely to hear you speaking it, though. You know, I know you do speak a little bit of it here and there. You know, I
think
beautiful.
It's important to have it in there. Like, anytime I've travelled abroad, I've always felt like I'd love to have more of my songs as Oscar Gaeilge, that I could kind of communicate that, just share the language with the world, because there's still so few people out there that understand that Irish is a language, and it's our language, and it's a very intrinsic part of our cultural identity. So it's nice to be able to do it when I can. And I've got a couple of friends who are fabulous Gaeilgors who help me out kind of rewriting stuff and translating stuff. So that's part of the goal. You know, I'm winging it this year, but there's these little kind of drops here and there that I know, little goals. I just need to firm those up, I think.
Yeah, very good. Well, I mean, you didn't know what the year gone out was going to bring, and it just ended up being amazing for you. So I suppose it's really about being open to collaborations or, you know, opportunities, and kind of
for sure. Just being open to saying yes to things, as you say yourself, not like not allowing yourself to say no to yourself when things come up, and letting whatever it is out when it starts. It's like something in your chest is like poking you, and you just have to kind of let it out.
What would you have any advice about songwriting? And like, what if somebody like can't finish a song? I'm not talking about anyone in particular.
I think it's such a strange, like, I've done workshops in songwriting and I've all this kind of masterclass stuff, and it's such a subjective process, and it's such a personal, kind of a delicate process as well, you know. I think you kind of have to allow it to happen. Like, if you can't finish a song, go away and start a new one. Like, and it doesn't have to be brilliant, but just don't self-edit. Go away and just write something else. Just like, you know, a 1 minute ditty about how much you love coffee, if that's what it is.
Yeah.
And just switch tracks for a couple of seconds and just allow your brain to switch off, because you can get into this awful state of like being really bogged down and trying to finish this thing. And you never know when that spark of inspiration will come back again. And you'll know exactly what it is, exactly what the last chorus or the last verse needs to be to really round a project out. But if you force it, I find you can wind up with something that you don't love as much as you should, or that doesn't do justice to the message that... I was reading a book called, I think it's called Dancing with the Stars or Dancing with the Gods. I'm not 100% sure what it's called, but he talks about like this idea of like, you wrote a song that you don't like now, but you still have to love the song, because whatever sparked the initial inspiration to write it is important. Like, that was important, and it was what it was, and just honor that and allow it to be. And if it's a thing that you shelf it and never come back to it, fine. But like, what I will say is Birdsong is a song I wrote in 2016 and I shelved, and then came back to it last year, and it's become what it is.
That's
So
amazing.
you just never know. So just allow songs to be and to live their life. That song has had like, I started writing that song technically in 2012.
Wow.
So like, you just never know.
Yeah, it's like keep all your ideas in like a little book and, you know, don't get rid of. I always say that as well, even to like students who do a bit of songwriting. Don't throw anything away, like, because you might come back to it again, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You'd be amazed at how much stuff comes back to you. And when it does, like if you have an idea, if you find yourself singing a song you wrote 10 years ago to yourself, like, and you never did anything with it, revisit that. Like, obviously something in it has connected on a very, very deep level and it's very important to you. And there's nothing like seeing a musician on stage singing something that they really love and that is really important to them. So even if it's not technically the best song in the world, it can still, if it resonates that much with you, it probably resonates with other people. And that's what I think songwriting and performing is about.
So that's it then. What's your plan for the rest of the day?
Oh, I think we're going to take our little bundle of mischief to the park. I have a dog, by the way. That's
Willow,
not a baby.
yes.
That's not a baby. We're trying to get her used to hopping in and out of the car. So little trips to the park where she has like that kind of nice positive association with the car would be great.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to do that. And aside of that, I know there is a bunch of stuff I was meant to do. I'm studying up on this script for this musical I'm singing in and trying to get that into my brain and my bones a little bit. So yeah, that's the main thing.
Lovely. Yes, I think dogs are such great company. Like we have a little dog here in the house, like a little half Shih Tzu, half something else. I think they're so cute. Like they're like little like kids or something in the house.
Yeah, occasionally I just stop and look at her and I'm like, you are this small, hairy, four-legged creature that lives with us, and that's so weird. Like, so you're this bundle of like purity and innocence and play, and that's all you are. And there's something so admirable and amazing about that. And you let us dress you up in stupid clothes and project our weird human emotions onto you, and like, you just don't deserve them.